The man who made rock music a big deal is back in the news. This time, though, the story isn't about breathing fire or stadiums that are full. What the monster has done has made many angry and amazed. Things are happening that are much stranger. Even people who have been with him for a long time are starting to wonder if he has finally taken on too much. Do you believe Gene Simmons has gone too far this time, or is this the most daring thing he's ever done? You might be surprised by the answers. The tour meltdown that shocked everyone. The autumn began gently and took almost everyone by surprise. In March 2025, Gene Simmons, the man who established a theatrical rock empire, ran into a problem that felt more like an embarrassment than a small problem. Promoters and fans were shocked to learn that 17 out of 23 of his solo shows had been cancelled only days before the tour was set to begin. Fans didn't expect a rock legend to make that kind of declaration, and what was supposed to be a celebration of his solo career turned into a time when people wondered what gone wrong. The timing made this much worse. These weren't dates that could be casually moved to months in the future. Fans had ordered tickets, cleared their schedules, and were counting down the days. Then, out of nowhere, tickets that had already been bought could be returned. And those who had marked dates on their calendars were told to wait. When concerts fall apart thus close to the start time, it doesn't feel like a scheduling conflict. It seems like something greater is going on, something that speaks to a bigger issue. The explanation spread swiftly within the music business. Promoters and people who follow the industry closely discreetly said that ticket sales had been disappointing in numerous areas. People spread those rumors on music blogs and fan forums, where they even compared the size of the venues to the number of tickets sold. It was the kind of conversation that doesn't really mean much on its own. But it was hard to dismiss the rumors because so many people were saying the same thing. And it was what made the whole pill tougher to take. For years, we all knew that Gene Simmons' gigs always drew huge crowds and admirers from miles away. The picture of him standing in front of empty seats didn't fit with the legacy of the man who had sold out stadiums all over the world. People started talking about how he went from leading huge tours to having trouble filling venues. Was the magic gone when he got out of the Kiss machine, or had the fans just moved on? We can never be sure. But there was a rude comment that ended the whole talk. Eddie Trunk, a well-known voice in rock media, wrote on his X platform to make it apparent that not all of Gene Simmons' shows are cancelled. Some are. People are responding to a venue's announcement that it would not be open. It's not a tour announcement. There are a few programs on right now, but a few have been cancelled. You don't have to be a genius to figure out why they cancelled it. The comment hit like a cold observation and became a simple way to say what many others thought was evident. The market seemed to have spoken, but not in Simmons's favor. That reply didn't explain everything, but it made a building impression clearer and left everyone wondering what the answer was. What did that signify for the demon of rock's next move if he couldn't get people to come to his shows anymore? What happened on stage was one thing, but what was going on behind the scenes might be the true story. The choices that make this tour happen are where things get even more interesting. Simmons wanted to make it as easy and straightforward as possible to go on tour. He said it himself, by the way, "I came up with a business model that is only half genius. I come with my guitar pick. That's all. There are no roadies, vehicles, or equipment. The promoter takes care of everything. The airfare, accommodations, amplifiers, drums, and everything else are all hired in the area. That's the cost for the promoter. And I keep whatever amount is 6 figures or more." The proposal sounded smart and like it would work well. There was no huge staff to move around, no costly setup that cut into revenues, just the man, the songs, and a lean business that made the most of every dollar. To fans, it sounded like a look behind the scenes. It looked like a model that could stretch further than before with fewer moving pieces on the business side. For a while, the maths made sense. Simmons said that he was making more money each solo gig than he ever did with Kiss. Smaller venues meant reduced expenditures, and with fewer people to feed, he got a bigger portion of the money. When he planned it, it was a good idea. You could still offer people the music they came for and make more money if you took away the big show, the fireworks, and the big production. This plan looked like it would work out well. But then reality hit, and it hit hard. Sales of tickets were lower than expected. And soon, all of the April and May days were gently crossed off the calendar. As we stated, 17 shows were pushed back, reimbursements started to come in, and VIP packages that had been advertised as once-in-a-lifetime experiences suddenly became problems. People who paid for such meet-and-greet sessions were undoubtedly confused about what went wrong. A plan that was supposed to work well was suddenly falling apart because theaters were empty. Fans noticed right away and didn't keep silent. As usual, social media feeds quickly filled up with screenshots of cancellation statements and sad comments. They talked about the prices of the tickets, the time of the show, and even if Simmons could still get a crowd without the complete Kiss machine, which is the band behind him. It appeared like the whole thing was a threat to his legacy, and the talk about it continued to rise every day. Promoters were running around behind the scenes. Last-minute cancellations meant handling refunds, renegotiating, and trying to keep the other dates alive. The effect for venues was more than just money. Knew that these shows had been given prime calendar places, but now they were empty. It was a logistical nightmare for local teams. Some promoters saw it as a warning sign. A bumpy launch can be worse than a slow one because bad press can be hard to shrug off and news spreads quickly in the business. What began off as a simple way to tour became incredibly difficult. The idea only worked if people came to see it. And when they didn't, the whole thing fell apart. What should have been a lean, efficient way to make money has turned into a costly public failure. But the end of the tour wasn't the end of the narrative. If anything, it made me wonder even more what this signified for Gene Simmons' future in live music. It's only fair to go back to the beginning of this story and see what Gene Simmons did to convert a dream into a rock empire, since Kiss has previously been mentioned. From a failed band to the Kiss empire. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were in a band called Wicked Lester before Kiss became a brand that sold out stadiums. Things didn't go well. Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons have one of the most interesting pairings in rock music. They met in the early 1970s and became close friends because they both wanted to start a band that would be different. Together, they made Kiss a huge success. Some people call their partnership a creative marriage. One based on respect, ambition, and the odd fight. Paul has said that working with Gene hasn't always been simple. I didn't really like Gene when I first met him. But there was a practical side to it. To attain your objective, you need to make a list of what's most essential to you and put them in order. I knew that Gene and I were more stronger together than I was by myself. I don't think he actually knew that. He remembered that it didn't matter anymore. Gene's strong personality, many business deals, and love of the spotlight have sometimes caused problems between them. They've stayed together for more than 50 years, even if they don't always agree. Paul has remarked that Gene is like family to him, no matter how many times they quarrel. Their cooperation works because they both contribute something unique to the table. Gene is the businessman and troublemaker, whereas Paul is the perfectionist and musical architect. They've developed a career together that has lasted through changing fashions, fights between themselves, and the ups and downs of fame. Now they're back where it all started for them. There was a time when Epic Records made their album, listened to it, and then put it away. The label said the sound was too chaotic and wouldn't work on the radio. That choice was a wake-up call for Gene and Paul. They needed to think wider than just music if they wanted a job. That rejection made them leave Wicked Lester's gentler sound behind and start afresh with a rougher edge, a grander vision, and a desire to take over the stage in whatever manner they could. It was the choice that made them hire Peter Criss and Ace Frehley. Made Kiss and planned out the whole band. Simmons and Stanley were terrified that the old Wicked Lester recordings would be leaked to make a fast buck once Kiss started to get notice. They didn't want their past to get in the way of their future. There was only one way to fix it. Get the master tapes. Kiss got $138,000 together and bought the master tapes back. It wasn't about being proud, it was about having power. They were willing to pay to delete a part of their history in order to protect the story they were crafting. Now that everything was out of the way, they started to think about what kind of band they actually wanted to be. They thought that a regular rock band wouldn't be enough in January 1973. If they wanted people to remember them, they would have to show them something new. the idea of Kiss as something more than music began to take shape. They drew pictures of figures, experimented on makeup, and got ideas from horror flicks and comic books. Every practice turned into an experiment. Their goal was to give people something they couldn't ignore. At some point in those early days, they needed a name that people would remember. A short item. And something that would look strong on a poster. While they were driving around New York, Paul Stanley came up with the term KISS. People have tried to turn it into an acronym throughout the years, with fan theories like Knights in Satan's Service or Kids in Satan's Service. But the band has always stated that those interpretations are not true and that it was never meant to be an acronym. It was picked because it went beyond the English language. Their first gig as Kiss was a small one. They played at a small bar in Queens on January 30, 1973. There weren't enough people in the room to make it a crowd. A lot of them were friends or girlfriends. That could have been the end of the story, but they saw it as a new beginning. Those little shows let them try out new ideas, improve their image, and get more comfortable on stage. They learned something new every night about what worked and what didn't. The act quickly became more than just music. The turning point occurred when their manager, Bill Alcoin, asked a magician to teach Gene Simmons how to breathe fire. It was risky, and the first time he tried it, his hair almost caught fire. Most people would have given up right then and there, thinking it wasn't worth the risk, but Simmons did the opposite. He made the stunt a defining point for Kiss shows for years to come. People were surprised when the concerts suddenly came to life. People weren't just watching a band anymore. They were watching something more like live theater, with actual danger in the air. They worked all the time behind the scenes. They did hundreds of gigs, some of them were in small pubs. Occasionally warming up for bigger performers and steadily building a name for themselves one gig at a time. Radio stations didn't pay attention to them, but it didn't stop the word from getting out. People who saw them live told their friends, and more people came. The hard effort was beginning to pay off in a way that was surprising. A live album came out in 1975, and everything changed. People who had never seen Kiss in person could now hear what all the fuss was about. The record captured the raw energy of their live acts and became a hit. It also kept Casablanca Records from going bankrupt, which meant that Kiss now had a label that was entirely committed to their success. After that, the growth was huge. In less than a year and a half, they went from playing for a few dozen people to headlining stadiums like Anaheim. Playing for tens of thousands of people. To be sure, the climb wasn't smooth, it was chaotic and dangerous a lot of the time, but it worked. They had transformed failure into an empire and shown that a blend of music and show could attract a lot of people. Still, there was one issue that hung over their accomplishment. Could that same approach still work decades later in a world that is vastly different, the height of fame and fortune, as well as controversies? They had made an empire. But empires do get people's attention, don't they? What happened next was a mix of success and problems that kept their name in the news for more than just music. After the first few years of chaos and inventiveness, Kiss had become so famous that it seemed like nothing could stop them. The next part of their tale would take their creativity, egos, and personal lives to places they had never been before. And not all of it would turn out well. Kiss made one of the most daring maneuvers in rock history on September 18, 1978. On the same day, all four members put out individual albums. It was something that no other band had the guts to do. It looked to the public like a great way to celebrate their uniqueness. It was also a test behind the scenes, since each member now had a way to see who could stand on their own without the others. The answer was Gene Simmons, as it turned out. His album reached platinum, which meant it sold a lot of copies and allowed him the right to brag. It also climbed higher on the charts than the other three. This was proof to Simmons that he was more than just a member of the band. He was a star in his own right, and that success affected how he acted on and off stage. It also seemed like Kiss could survive anything if they could get through solo albums. And that idea was about to be put to the test. The band starred in the TV movie Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park later that same year. It was supposed to be a fun, silly undertaking, but it ended up being something that a lot of the band members would rather forget. Critics hated the movie, and fans made fun of it. Crew members were ordered not to talk about it in interviews. Kiss may rule the stage, but their image could be weak outside of music. Simmons still wasn't ready to leave Hollywood, though. He got a professional acting job in Michael Crichton's sci-fi movie Runaway in 1984. He showed he could go deeper by playing the villain Dr. Charles Luther, who was a calculating scientist whose creations turned against him. The act made it clear to everyone that Gene wanted more than just to be a musician. He was just getting started. Before long, the news stories changed from his employment to his personal life. He went out with Cher in the late 1970s, and a lot of people were interested in their connection. This was the exact moment that made the news in rock and roll. Simmons asked Cher what he should gift her for Christmas. Then Cher ordered him to phone her best friend, Diana Ross, and ask her what she liked. Simmons and Diana Ross hooked together, went shopping, hit it off, and quickly became friends who fell in love. The tale spread like wildfire in magazines and newspapers, and rumors say that Cher and Ross's friendship never truly healed. Simmons wasn't just a musician anymore. He was on the main page for all the wrong reasons. Simmons didn't mind the attention. He has talked about his love life a lot over the years, frequently as part of his rock star character. Some people liked how honest he was, while others believed it was just his ego. Either way, the attention made him impossible to ignore, and it kept Kiss in the news. Even when they weren't on tour. The band understood they had to do something big to stay popular by the early 1980s. On September 18, 1983, they stunned audiences by taking off their makeup live on MTV. This was the moment. Fans suddenly saw their genuine faces after 10 years of not knowing. They also put out Lick It Up, an album with a heavier, tougher sound that lured back a lot of rock lovers who had stopped listening. The risk paid off. That year, the record went gold, and later it went platinum. It seemed like Kiss had changed with the times and became a new band. Kiss was everywhere and not just making money from their songs. Their faces were on toys, lunchboxes, masks, comic novels, and many other things that made their insignia known to nearly every family. By the early 1980s, selling things had become one of their main ways to make money. Business journalists regularly said that Kiss's brand and licensing partnerships will last longer than many music trends. This made Simmons and the rest of the band think differently about fame and their future. Gene Simmons has played the demon, the businessman, and the newsmaker. Now, let's look at his family and see what life was actually like when he wasn't on stage. Reality TV and family life. Simmons's life at home was equally as busy and sometimes even more dramatic as his life at work. It all began in 1983 at the Playboy Mansion, where he met Shannon Tweed, who was named Playmate of the Year in 1982. What started as a fortuitous meeting grew into a romance that lasted for decades, with its own ups and downs. Simmons and Shannon made a life together that wasn't like everyone else's. He didn't want to get married for about 30 years, and he often joked that marriage was a trap and quoted Groucho Marx to back it up. He chose to stay single, even though Shannon stood by him, while other rock stars went through marriages, divorces, and scandals. This strange combination became a part of who he was. There were clues that the tension was rising, though, and the question of whether he would ever commit hung over their story like a shadow. When their private life became a public display, this shadow became impossible to ignore. When A&E started airing Gene Simmons' Family Jewels in 2006, fans were suddenly inside their house, observing everything from calm breakfasts to loud fights. The show made their daily lives into TV episodes, and that type of exposure can make even the simplest difficulties seem bigger. The more people watched, the harder it was for the family to be actual people, being actors in their own show. When real-life scandals came crashing through the front door, this balancing act proved even harder. In 2008, an intimate tape of Simmons appeared online, and his team promptly vowed to sue to have it taken down. The news was everywhere, and all of a sudden, the family's private anguish became public talk. A few years later, things got even worse. When Shannon left the Joy Behar show set following a tense conversation about Simmons' history. In the summer of 2011, the problems in Simmons and Shannon Tweed's relationship were no longer veiled. They were playing out in real time, and one of the best parts was when they were on the Joy Behar show. The studio felt tense as soon as the cameras started filming. Bihar played a footage from Gene Simmons' family jewels that showed Simmons leaving a restaurant with two young women. Then he turned to Simmons to get his reaction. Simmons made a joke about it, as he always does. Shannon took off her microphone, called Simmons a pig, and stormed off the set in front of a live audience. The set was quiet for a few seconds, and Simmons and Bihar had to figure out what to do next. Simmons, visibly shaken, he said the host had set him up. Bihar said that the film came straight from A&E, the network that made the couple's reality show. This one walk-off put their relationship to the test and made others question if they would make it through. But on June 26, 2011, the story that everyone had been waiting for finally came out. Simmons asked her to marry him, and their wedding was one of the most important events in the story. Shannon torched Simmons' collection of old Polaroids in a memorable episode. This was a symbolic way for him to end his prior life. It felt like a promise to both the pair and the public, and millions of followers watched as they made a new start. Nick and Sophie, their children, too felt the pressure of growing up in a house where nothing kept private for long. Nick, who wanted to write comic books, got caught up in a plagiarism scandal that made it impossible for his idea to be published. Sophie had her own problems to deal with, like growing up in front of cameras and dealing with the larger-than-life image of her father. As the world watched, both siblings had to figure out who they were, which added another element of stress to the family's story. The Simmons-Shannon story highlights how personal decisions may turn into public events. It starts with a meeting in Malibu and ends with a wedding that people all over the world can view on TV. Simmons took a chance by inviting cameras into his home, and it paid him with fame, but it also cost him something. The show let fans into their world, but it also made family problems into public drama, leaving everyone to wonder which portions of their story were really over and which would always be there. You won't believe what happened when Simmons strolled into Fox News headquarters if you thought the family turmoil was bad. What was supposed to be a normal appearance turned into a newsworthy event. The ban on Fox News that startled everyone. Gene Simmons didn't exactly fade away after the contentious TV discussion with Joy Behar. He soon found himself in another media tempest, this time at Fox Studios. He had been scheduled to promote On Power, his short, incisive guide to influence and success, and the interview on camera went off without a hitch. This usually seemed like just another stop on a hectic book tour. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling was something no one saw coming. Later reports said that Simmons made inappropriate comments, showed his chest, and even tapped colleagues with his book at a private staff meeting. We don't really know if everything happened exactly as it was said. But the complaints that came after that were serious enough to get the network to act right away. Simmons flatly disputed the claims. He said he hadn't done anything and that he usually comes with handlers and other people who can vouch for his behavior. This is a statement that many public celebrities adopt. This refusal did not end the conversation. It became an issue of who the public should trust instead. He also gave a more secretive reason. Simmons told the people who interviewed him that someone in the building had the goods on him and that some of the tale was made up or given to the press. He said that the accusations came from a news story and hinted that people inside the network sought to hurt his reputation. It's hard to prove that something is true. The assertion, on the other hand, gave rise to a counterstory that the event was at least partly made up or exaggerated. And speaking of Fox, they weren't going to wait around to figure it out. The network said within days that Gene Simmons would not be allowed to be on their program again. It wasn't a short break. It was labeled a lifetime ban by the media. The move shocked everyone in the media, and everyone wondered why they acted so swiftly when the news wasn't entirely confirmed. Both sides sought to make the story work for them. Simmons said the event was a mistake and an overreaction. Fox stood by its crew in the ban, though. What was left was an unpleasant feeling that neither version adequately conveyed what truly transpired. How do you deal with a guest that says they didn't do anything wrong and is banned for life? We can never know. After all the news stories and media backlash, Simmons still had one more thing to say to keep people talking. This time, it wasn't about a ban or a TV network. It was about the future of Kiss. The tease of the reunion. Gene Simmons found a way to change the subject by the time the Fox scandal died down. He didn't concentrate on the bands and headlines, instead, he moved the attention back to the one thing that had always kept the Kiss machine going. The band said in March 2025 that there would be a 3-day Kiss Army Storms Vegas event at Virgin Hotels Las Vegas from November 14 to 16, 2025. It wasn't called a tour or a goodbye, but the news felt like it was greater than either. To the die-hard fans who had followed every twist and turn in the band's narrative, this seemed like something that should be marked on the calendar. The twist in the show made the announcement exciting. The organizers claimed that the program would involve a live performance without masks. This style of staging made the concert seem more intimate and surprising than a regular arena presentation. The concept of an unmasked set in Las Vegas for a band that is known for its personas and makeup made it seem like an invitation to see the real people behind the myth. And that prospect had fans talking. Hints about who will show up sparked even more controversy. Official messages indicated that Paul Stanley and Simmons will be at the event and mentioned special guests, which led to rumors that other classic members would also show up. Fans quickly started to analyze every teaser and social media post, looking for clues about whether the other members of the band, Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, may come back. The band's announcement gave people optimism without making any promises, and that ambiguity separated the Kiss Army between those who were hopeful and those who were doubtful. For people who had been there since the beginning, the thought of a performance without masks was very moving. It was a chance to take off the makeup and see the man behind it one last time. Some others thought the announcement was hazardous. What if the show didn't live up to the hype? What if it took away too much of the enchantment and ruined it? Simmons stoked the flames with a subtle tease, stating that maybe the stars might align for something very amazing. Will the Vegas Gambit bring back the kind of enchantment that made the band famous? Please leave your opinions in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video on your screen if you like this one.